If you're thinking about going into retail, you need to watch this first. By the way, I'm KJ Miller. I am a founder, lecturer, and content creator. I love all things business, beauty, and pop culture. If you like any of that, be sure to subscribe. Now let's get into it. Okay, before I dive in, what are my credentials? I have sold my brand, Minted Cosmetics, into a number of retailers, including, most notably, Target, Ulta, and Walgreens. We were also in Macy's. We also sold via HSN and QVC. We were doing a lot, okay? So I do know a fair amount about selling your brand into retail, working with retail partners. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that this video is actually inspired by a podcast clip I saw on Morgan DeBond's TikTok page. I want to be very clear, I did not watch her full podcast episode, but I will link the clip. In this podcast clip, she is talking about the fact that a number of Black-owned businesses have been exited from retail partners, places like Target and Ulta and Sephora. So I think she was speaking primarily about beauty brands, but in general, other brands as well. And the guest that she had on was essentially saying a lot of these brands got exited because they weren't meeting sell-through targets. Now, like I said, I didn't watch the whole podcast clip, so they may have made a number of nuanced points. But that was the primary point of this clip. One, that these brands were exited because they weren't hitting sell-through targets. And two, Morgan's point was too many Black-owned brands were relying on these partnerships when people were feeling so excited about Black Lives Matter and everything else. Too many brands were relying on those partnerships. And you really can't rely on, I guess, let's call them handouts. Again, having not watched the full podcast, I disagree with some of the points made in this clip. And I say this as a brand that has been exited from Target. Minted is no longer selling in Target. If you still see us there, you'll probably see clearing through the merchandise. There are a lot of reasons for that, and I'm going to talk you through what I would do differently and what I plan to do differently go forward as we enter new conversations with new retail partners, or even maybe some of our old retail partners. You don't know. We might be back in Target one day, okay? I want to give my perspective on this. I want to tell you the things that I would do differently and also just share my take on, again, the clip of the podcast that I saw. So starting with the podcast, I will say I don't think the reason we're seeing, and by the way, it's not just Black-owned indie brands. You are seeing indie brands, all sorts of indie brands being exited, and these retailers cycle through brands every year. Every time they do a reset, which for Target and Ulta is about twice a year. Sephora, I don't know what Sephora's schedule is. I never sold in Sephora. But every time these guys do a reset, they are bringing in new brands and getting rid of old brands. And there are not enough Black-owned brands for every year them to be getting rid of Black-owned brands. Okay, so they're getting rid of all sorts of folks every single year. Let's start there. And what I will say, my experience is that what really makes the difference between a brand that has longevity on shelf and a brand that doesn't, yes, obviously sell-through matters. If no one is buying your stuff, of course, that matters. But what really makes a difference is, do you have the capital? Do you have the cash? Do you have the resources to test your way into a winning retail strategy? Because that takes time. Almost any brand that ends up on shelf is going to find that some number of the SKUs they're selling sells really well. Let's use Minted as an example. We had three primary categories selling at Target. We had our lip liner, our lip gloss, and our lipstick. And also, that's the order of how expensive they were, least to most. Our lip liners were $12. Our lip glosses were, now I'm blanking. I think we sold our lip glosses at Target for $14, and then our lipstick we sold for $15. And that is also the order of how successful they were. Our lip liners were the most successful category, followed by gloss, followed by lipstick. I don't think it's a coincidence that the least expensive category was our most successful at Target. Okay, so using us as an example, as we learned that lip liner, because lip liner, not only was it most successful for us, we were doing better than a lot of big brand lip liners. And that's a fact. That's no cap, okay? I saw the data. We were performing very well in our stores for lip liner, including when you compared us to big national brands. However, one, it takes time for a brand to reset. They only reset, like I said, twice a year, and it takes money. So in order for me to say, I'm looking at my assortment and I'm seeing oh, lip liner is performing better than lip gloss and much better than lipstick. Maybe I should start switching out some SKUs. Maybe I should replace some of my lipstick SKUs for lip liner SKUs. Well, for one thing, I already had all my lip liner in store. So that means now I got to make more lip liner, right? That's product development. That takes time. Also, I have to pay if I want to exit SKUs from Target. They're not just going to do that for me for free. I have to pay for them to mark it down or to return it to me, right? As in essentially pay them what they've already paid me for the merchandise. That's expensive. So the brands that you see really having longevity on shelf oftentimes are the bigger brands, because these are the brands that can afford to figure it out. To figure out, oh, this new thing that we launched isn't doing well. Now I'm going to give Target $1 million to clear out that space and let me keep the space to test something else that's going to work better. That's an expensive game, okay? And that's why I think what it really comes down to a lot of the time, yes, you do need to sell through, but more than that, you need to be able to spend the money when it's not selling through in order to figure out something that will. Okay, so I just want to share that because that's certainly been not just my experience, but when I talk to other founders who are on shelf at Target and Sephora and Ulta, they're saying the same things. It's a money game. Do you have the capital needed to test and learn your way into your most successful on shelf strategy? So that's the first thing I want to say. So with that said, I am now going to share the top 3 things I would do differently if I were launching with a retail partner today. And you will notice throughout these 3 topics I'm about to give you, they all tie back to that original idea I just shared of having the resources on hand to test and learn, okay? So the number one thing I would do differently is I would focus on a single retail partner for at least a full year, if not 2. We launched with Target and Ulta in multiple hundreds of doors with both of those stores within months of each other. And because being in retail is an expensive game, you're testing, you're learning, you're marketing, you're offering sample. There's just a lot of resources that go into really being in retail the right way. I definitely feel like we were spread a bit too thin for the resources that we had. Now, some startups are far better capitalized than we were. You know, Glossier raised $10 million before they even sold a SKU, okay? That was not me. So if you've got the money, fine. But because we were always undercapitalized, I wish we had focused on just one, either just Target or just Ulta. So number one piece of advice and number one learning from me, focus on one retailer at a time. And by the way, they prefer that too, when you can say, I will give you 12-month exclusivity or even 24-month, 18-month exclusivity. They love that. They would love to be the destination for your brand. Once they take that chance on you, once they say, okay, I'm going to dedicate shelf space to your brand, if you're able to say, and as a thank you, I'm going to give you exclusivity, they love to hear it, okay? So not only does it benefit you, it benefits them. And what it's going to allow you to do is really learn what works on shelf for that retailer, which, by the way, might not be the same thing that works in other retailers. You're going to learn what works. When you find that some SKUs don't work, by the way, there's no brand out there that has nothing but top performing SKUs. That's just simply not the way it works. The 80-20 rule is true for most brands. You've got about 20% of your assortment doing 80% of your revenue, right? So the question is, can you get everything that you're selling to be as productive as possible? That takes time, that takes learning, and that takes dollars. So if you can do that, focusing in on one retailer, you're going to maximize the resources you've got. So that's learning number one. Learning number two is to keep your initial assortment small. If I could go back in time and do anything differently, I'll actually at this point use Ulta as an example. When we launched with Ulta, we launched with many categories. We had our lipstick, gloss, and liner, yes, which was also at Target, but we also had foundation. We also had bronzer. We also had setting powder. We also had blush. We had primer. We had setting spray. We had a big assortment pretty much right out the gate. And I was so excited because finally the minted customer was going to be able to shop essentially her full minted face in store, and I wanted to give that to her. And by the way, I still do. I still think getting to that place is the goal. But launching that way was a lot. Again, it comes back to, because it's so expensive to be in store, you've got to figure out what's going to allow me to put my best foot forward. And if something isn't working, what's going to allow me to pivot as quickly as I need to. Well, when I've got, call it 50 different SKUs in a store, and now I need to pivot, instead of having to pivot on maybe one of 5 SKUs that I've put in or 2 of 10 SKUs that I've put in, I'm needing to pivot on 5, 10 SKUs that aren't working. 5 to 10 out of 50 might not sound like a lot, but mind you, each one of those 10 SKUs is in 800 doors, okay? So if it's not working and Ulta says, hey, we want to replace this SKU, now I'm taking those 10 SKUs, each of which might have 3 to 4 units sitting either at the store or in the DCs, times 800 doors. That's a big expense if now I've got to pay to return it or I've got to fund the markdown for it, right? Versus if I had said, you know what, Ulta, I want to start with one shelf of just my hero products. All I want to put in is gloss and lip liner because I know she loves gloss and lip liner. I know it's having a moment. I know it worked so well because I just spent a year selling it really well over at this retailer because I was exclusive to them for a year. I know it's going to hit. I really want to get these learnings that I've learned and grown, right? It's a lot of times sometimes retailers are going to ask you to do more sooner because they're basing it on, well, how much space do I need to fill? I've just exited these 3 brands. Now I have these 3 end caps I need to fill. I'm really excited about your brand. I'll give you a full end cap. Well, that sounds great. It sounds amazing. And that initial PO is going to be very big and very lucrative and very enticing. But is it going to set you up for success? That to me is the real question. And I think by launching with a smaller assortment of only your hero SKUs, you set yourself up for success. The third thing I would have done differently and plan to do differently when we go back out into retail in the future is focus on getting my price point in the sweet spot for that retailer. So what do I mean by that? With Target, like I said, our most successful item was our least pricey item. And that is because Target is a mass retailer. They are known for value. No one's going to Target with the plan of spending $20 on a lipstick, right? That's just not what you expect when you walk into Target, that lipstick is going to cost you somewhere between $8 and $12, right? That's your expectation because it's Target. Well, my lipstick was $14. That means I was at the highest price point almost of any of the lipstick in the store. That's a really difficult place to sit. Can it be done? Of course it can. But does it make your life harder? Yes, it does. And I wish I had just simply bit the bullet and said, you know what? If I'm going to go into mass, I want to be in mass at a price point that the customer loves, not a price point that the customer has to talk herself into, because that's another hurdle that I am then having to jump over. Again, can it be done? Yes. But I found being in the sweet spot for that retailer from a pricing perspective sets you up for success. So those are my tips. I hope you can learn from my hard-won lessons, okay? I have been through it, honey, but I've learned a lot, and I am never going to gatekeep. I'm going to share what I learned with you, and I hope it's helpful. And if you like content like this, please be sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.